Hi, baddies. Welcome back to another episode of Terra's Baddies Club. I am your host, Terra Newell. It has been quite a week, so I am very casual, no makeup, hair up, and just feeling this week and just absorbing the energy. That's why this episode was not arrived on Wednesday. But I'm so excited to get into this episode. This episode was also recorded in the last week in March. So I just want everyone to know for timeline wise, we have now gotten into the Lori Vallow trial. And it has been quite an interesting ride so far, but we're going to talk about the predictions that we had for it. We're going to be talking about P. Diddy a little bit and also Tupac and some other cases with Julie Grant. So I'm so excited to have her on today. She is a licensed attorney, a journalist, and a trial expert. You may know her from her work from Court TV. She has opening statements with Julie Grant. So let's welcome Julie Grant today and let's get into this episode. Hi, Julie. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you on. We connected at CrimeCon. It was so fun. We connected in the elevator.
We did, Tara. It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited because we met at CrimeCon. It was a great time. We got to talk a little bit, but then really connected later on Instagram and all the things, all the socials.
Right on the socials, exactly. In the elevator, it was like, oh my gosh, I know you. I know you. It was like so great to connect for like all of like 2 seconds and exchange contact information to stay in touch. You were just fabulous. I'm a great admirer of your work and everything you're doing for survivors in the true crime community.
Well, thank you. So you have your show on Court TV.
It's called Opening Statements with Julie Grant. So we kick
Yes.
things off for the court day. I'm the morning show to get everybody all ready for the day ahead on Court TV Live.
Yes, and you are the perfect person for that
Oh,
podcast because you have such a background. Can you talk about your background?
sure. So if I was a recipe, I always tell people I would be like shake equal parts journalist and lawyer. And then you get me. So I studied both in college. I did journalism first, went back to school, became a lawyer, became a prosecutor, served as a prosecutor for 4 years in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then I got back into journalism. And then I got back into law a little bit while I was still working as a journalist. And I did my LLM in trial advocacy so that when I retire someday from television, I want to maybe be a part-time professor. And so I'm qualified to teach trial advocacy to lawyers, law students. You could call me a trial expert technically because of that. But I stayed the course in journalism and then went through 3 different local markets doing TV news, and then got picked up to go to Court TV Network when the network relaunched in 2019. So yeah, we're coming up on our 6-year anniversary since relaunch. I just hit my 6-year anniversary working there, and I was hired, a few months before the official launch, which was in May of 2019. So it goes fast, Tara, as you know.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I feel the industry is ever evolving, ever moving, and I feel like those are just so many different lives.
Right. It's funny you say that because I always tell people how I wish we had more time in this lifetime because there's so many things that I would love to do. And I wound up becoming a prosecutor along the way, just following my passions. And I love that job so much. I could have done it forever. I really felt like, my gosh, I could do this job every single day and never see the same case twice. It was learning something new every day. And I knew I wanted to get back into journalism. That was my first love, really. And I always thought to myself, gosh, if I had more time, I would love to go be a federal prosecutor or go become a judge. I kid around too. I say this sometimes on the air, Tara, and it's true. When I retire, I would love to be a magistrate judge and work part-time at the municipal court. I think I'd be really good at, setting bail for cases, sending the important cases up to the big court, the Court of Common Pleas, and then getting rid of the stuff that doesn't matter and trying to give people second chances if at all possible. Maybe one day, Judge Julie. We'll see. For now, just Julie.
I am just so you are so funny because you're planning
Thanks.
jobs for when you
Did I
retire.
retire? Yeah.
You're
I know. I
planning
think
more
about it a
work.
lot, huh, Tara? Tara, yeah, it's there's so much focus on that. Gosh, what's that say about me? I need to take a vacation, huh?
It's okay. In this industry, it's important to be a workaholic and you're so passionate for what you do. And it just shows too. I think it's interesting that you do journalism with also having your background as a prosecutor because
Mm.
I think it gives you a different set of ethics with that.
Right. Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because as you know, Tara, from being such a great voice in the true crime community space, which you are, you know that prosecutors are bound by certain ethical rules that defense attorneys aren't bound by. They have special rules and considerations they have to follow. I think when you're held to that higher standard as a prosecutor, it just makes you an even better journalist. I think I came out a better journalist, as you said, from having had that experience and then also seeing what victims go through. So often when we see cases that make their way onto television, into the radio space, onto podcasts, we see things from the defendant's perspective. There's so much of a focus on the defendant and the defendant's actions and the evidence against the defendant. Rarely are people focused on the victims and the victims who are surviving, maybe the primary victim who's deceased or whatever the case may be. So having that background keeps me very victim centered in my storytelling. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think that's why you and I kind of had this instant bond because you're so victim centered and survivor centered and really focused on giving people a platform to be uplifted and to have a voice. That's fortunately been something I've been able to do on my show is be a voice for victims and look at things through that lens and not through the lens of hype and sensationalism or from the perspective of the person charged, but from the people who've been wronged instead.
Yes. And given our background, it's hard not to have our opinions about cases and also bring a level of expertise. I mean, your expertise is different than my expertise. Mine's
Sure.
more emotional
Oh, no,
from
it's
my trauma.
amazing. You're trauma informed. Yeah. I mean, you're really, a trauma informed victims advocate, which is amazing. How rare is that to find someone like you who's turned such an awful situation into something where you can help other people and teach other people and support other people. It's magnificent. You are amazing, Tara. You really are.
Well, thank you. I thank you. I feel like I just had you on
Mhm.
my podcast to compliment me.
Aw, you deserve it. It's all true. I wouldn't say if it weren't true.
Thank you. Well, okay. So, getting into a case that
Sure.
I think is very interesting. And also, I don't like that it has the zombie aspect of it because my case has a zombie aspect of it, but in a more hero sense, in a more like the bad guy is in the ground and, the woman comes forward and is the shiro.
Yeah.
But I think that that case to me and is disgusting because of what has been done. Okay, so when we're talking about her, she hasn't been 100% guilty of it, right? Or is she guilty of it?
Lori Vallow Daybell. So she has been found guilty in
Okay.
Idaho of three murders. The murders of her two minor children, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, and the murder of her fifth husband, Chad's first wife, Tammy Daybell. So she's been convicted of three murders, doing three life sentences in Idaho, but she's getting ready to go to trial now in Arizona. She's accused of conspiring with her now deceased brother, Alex Cox, to murder her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. And she's also accused of conspiring with her now deceased brother, Alex, to try to murder her niece's ex husband, Brandon Boudreaux.
Okay. So I just saw the Keith interview and she was trying to
Yes,
say all these things. So it made me so confusing, especially
it
when
is
they give
confusing.
them a voice.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a lot of names and what a web of lies that Lori Vallow has woven with the help of her fifth husband, Chad Daybell. And we noticed as she's getting ready to go to trial in Arizona, Now she's dropping the Vallow from her name. For a while, she was referred to as Lori Vallow Daybell, Vallow being her fourth husband, Charles's last name. He was killed by her now deceased brother, Alex Cox, in an incident that at the time was called a self-defense incident. Investigators thought that he was in this fight, with Alex Cox, and Alex Cox shot him in self-defense. Well, it turns out that was all garbage. It was garbage. The evidence that was later discovered showed that this was plotted and planned and not at all a self-defense case, just one that was made to appear like one. And even though Lori Vallow Daybell, now just Lori Daybell, she's just going Daybell now, Tara. She's heading into this trial for the fourth homicide that investigators are trying to tie her to. She wasn't present on the property when it happened, but as you know, that doesn't necessarily absolve someone of any criminal liability if they did in fact conspire with another perpetrator. So we're set to see this case happen. Jury selection is going to start on March 31st, excuse me. March 31st is when the jury selection begins, and then the trial will begin as soon as they get the jury seated after that. But you should know she's representing herself, making the
Okay.
decision to go pro se.
And what experience does she have with law, like with
None.
the
You know what,
book?
Tara? Her experience all comes from her sitting at the defense table as a criminal defendant. And she has the nerve to say to the judge, "Oh, I have experience studying the law and researching the law and all of that." Yeah, because of your homicides, the homicides of your two kids and your fifth husband's first wife. She ought to be ashamed of herself, but she's not. As you saw in the Dateline interview with Keith Morrison, she danced around everything. She just wanted to control the show, control the narrative, almost to make light of it. And you see, we're dealing with someone who appears to be incredibly narcissistic. I would go as far as to say the behavior seems to be sociopathic. And she's using religion as a guise to get away with these murders that she's been convicted of, is what she's saying. She's saying that in the end, she and Chad will be exonerated. She told Keith Morrison that Jesus has forgiven her, and that in the future, because she can see far ahead into that, because she's so special, she's going to be exonerated for what happened. But maybe not in Arizona. In Arizona, I think she's going to be convicted.
Oh my goodness. So what states did this all happen in?
Good question. So, two different states. So, in Idaho, she was tried and convicted of the murders of her two minor children, JJ and Tylee, and the murder of her fifth husband, Chad's first wife, Tammy Daybell. And what had happened was she was married to Charles Vallow, a wonderful man. By all accounts, everybody says he was just the nicest, sweetest man. And, Tara, I like to say he was the best advocate for those kids. He could see what was going on in the months before he was killed, and he was warning people. He even went to police and essentially said, "My wife has lost her mind. She's turned into somebody I don't recognize." And she was saying crazy things. She even went so far as to say to him, "I'll murder you." So she was saying these wild things, and she was using religion to try to say that these loved ones of hers had become possessed and taken over. You mentioned zombies, and trying to say that JJ and Tylee had been taken over and were zombies. Charles's body was taken over. And Chad, her husband, this cult leader, the doomsday cult leader, that's why we call her cult mom at Court TV, as you know, he was using these religious teachings to try to influence her, and she was trying to use sex to influence him. It was like the perfect storm of evil and selfishness and greed. And they thought that, well, if we can get the kids out of the way and the spouses out of the way, then we can be together. So the prosecutors in Idaho proved that they were trying to get rid of Tammy, the wife, and Tylee and JJ, the kids, to get together and life insurance policy from her. And it's going to come out in this Arizona trial. It did a little bit that they were after Charles Vallow's life insurance policy as well, but he was smart enough to change it and put it in his sister's name. His sister, you're going to recognize the name, Tara, Kay Woodcock is his sister. Kay and Larry, who I'm sure you know from going to CrimeCon and being voices in the true crime community, they are JJ and Tylee's grandparents, and they're wonderful, lovely, lovely people. And Charles and Kay are brother and sister, and Charles knew that Lori wasn't right and she wasn't acting like herself. And so the bottom line was these two were after sex and money and wanted to be selfish. And so they killed the children and killed Tammy. and pretended like they didn't know what happened. They went off to Hawaii. Nate Eaton, a wonderful colleague of ours with East Idaho News, went and tracked them down, and they had no answers when he was saying, "Where are your kids? Aren't you concerned?" And they didn't have a care in the world. And so now she's locked up for life for those murders. He's on death row for them, Tara. He got the death penalty. He has not been executed up to this point. There's an appellate process, as you know, so he's going through that legal process. We'll see if he is in fact executed, but Idaho has brought back the firing squad. So if it is determined that everything goes through the appellate review process and there's nothing that becomes overturned or something needs to get set back down to a lower court, then that could be how Chad Daybell's executed.
Yeah, wow. I
Mhm.
don't know how I feel about the death penalty, but that is a discussion for another day.
Sure. Yeah.
And I feel that, because I've known so many people in the true crime, like my ex Collier, like his dad, unalived his mom. And he wouldn't have wanted his dad to have the death penalty. So I like think
Sure.
about that, and I think about the people I know around that. However, if you've killed 3 innocent souls, and kids to me is another level. Like killing a kid, like there is something majorly wrong with you if you're going to if you're going to kill anyone, but especially a kid.
Right. I'm with you. I'm with you,
Yeah.
my friend. I always say that I feel like there should be a special court for child killers, child abusers, and animal abusers. I think they should all go to a special court where they shouldn't have the same rights as everybody else. I'm with you because these are members of our society that need extra protection, right? Our children are most vulnerable. They rely on adults to protect them. They're helpless. Animals, innocent, helpless. Yeah, I know. We could talk all day. Girl, I'll have to come back. We'll have that conversation another day, because wow, yeah, I go off. Sometimes I wish we had cruel and unusual punishment for those people. I do. Yeah.
Like I make terrible jokes that I would just Dexter them.
Would you say you Dexter them?
I would Dexter them, but I don't want to be put in that position ever again. Say that, but I would never want
Sure,
to
of course
go
not.
plan and plot because there is something just which makes murder more well, murder is horrible in a sense, but it's even worse when there's the plotting of it, when there's
Yeah.
when it's not just oh my gosh, what just happened?
Right. The premeditated murder.
Yes.
You're talking about exactly the first degree murders rather
Yes.
than like someone who commits a heat of passion crime. Of course, that's terrible too. But, when they're overtaken by the extreme emotional distress and just act. Yeah, that's a bit different. I'm with you.
Yeah, and I think it's different also with, like, the brain too, because the people
Yes.
who
Good
plot
point.
yeah, and they are more psychopathic.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. There's some dangerous people out there. And yeah, the death penalty is an interesting discussion, and that's a great point you bring up, because depending on the circumstances where I always say, we can never paint with broad brushstrokes. We have to look at every case individually, the circumstances, and then what, like you said, what the victim's family wants. Prosecutors are always going to consult the family before they make that weighty decision as to whether or not to seek the death penalty.
Yes. Well, that's good that they do that. I don't know exactly what they do because I feel like I've had to be disassociated with things. And, we'll talk later down the line in the Patreon portion about how my trial would have went.
Sure.
But, I didn't even get a trial. I was so disassociated during that time. So, yeah, but it's interesting to see what's going on in this case because to me, it's truly an evil case. Lori Vallow or Lori Daybell, however,
Right. Whatever
whatever her
name
name
of the
is.
moment she's using. Yeah. Daybell, apparently. Tara, she's telling us Daybell. So we'll go with that.
So, Lori Daybell, how do you think it's just going to end up for her?
This is going to be a circus. I
Okay.
predict she's going to be convicted and the jury will convict her quickly. The evidence is very good for the state of Arizona. When you look through the back and forth of what happened, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown, but initially, Lori's brother, Alex Cox, had said that Charles Vallow attacked him with a baseball bat. And if you look in some of the body camera video, you see him touching the back of his head and saying, oh gosh, he hit me in the back of my head. And he had I remember, like a little red mark on the back of his head. I can't even remember. Maybe there was a small cut, it looked like a paper cut. Charles Vallow was a minor league baseball player. He was an athlete. So this is a guy who knows how to swing a bat, swing and not miss. If he did hit him in the head with a baseball bat, just based on common sense, wouldn't you think maybe Alex Cox wouldn't be able to stand up, let alone, point to the teeny tiny little scratch on his head? So that's one thing. And then he also had his gun in the house ready to shoot him. And then he calls 911, and all on the call, you have to listen to it. It's incredible. The dispatcher is like, can you go perform CPR? And I forget exactly what he said, but it was like this incredible hesitation, like, nah, like his attitude, you got to listen to it. I can't even describe it to you. It's been a while since I've heard it, but the way he acts is very nonchalant, kind of casual. Yeah, no, I'm not going to go save him. Like, you can tell this is a guy who doesn't want to save. And this is his brother-in-law. I mean, remember at the time, they're brothers-in-law. None of it makes sense. Now you couple that with everything else we know, forensic evidence taken from phones, all of it, the plot with the kids, it just all points to her using him, Lori using her brother Alex as her protector. He was always kind of the guy that would kind of act like Lori's muscle. Whatever problem Lori had, put Alex on it. He'll take care of it. And it seems that that's what happened here. So I think the evidence is really strong to show that this was not a self-defense case. This seems to be an ambush of an attack is what the evidence seems to show. And I think that the state's going to have how should I put this? They'll be able to prove it with the evidence they have. I'm confident in that. What's going to be tough is the fact that she's going pro se, because a pro se litigant is a nightmare for everybody. It's a nightmare for the judge. It's a nightmare for the prosecutors. It's a nightmare for their standby counsel. And sometimes it's a nightmare for the jury, because this person just isn't going to know what to do and how to respond effectively. So I think it's going to be a very trying case for that reason, a very frustrating case. And she'll want to make a spectacle out of everything. I predict what she did with Keith Morrison in that Dateline interview that you saw, Tara. I think she's going to do with these witnesses, with the jury, with the judge. I think it's going to be the Lori Daybell show. And we're all just here to watch.
Oh my goodness. I don't feel like the judge is even going to let her do that, because you can't go and do certain things in court.
Right. The judge is going to have to rein her in. That's a good point. The judge is going to have to rein her in, keep her on track. And I'll give you an example of that. She hasn't given a firm answer, but there was an indication that came by way of her standby counsel, the person who's there ready to go, just in case at any point she says, I'm tired of being my own lawyer. I don't want this person to do it. That person has to step right in by law in Arizona. So the standby counsel gave indications that it's possible Lori could want to take the stand. She didn't give a firm answer to the judge, so we don't know firmly yet one way or the other, but given that she seems to like the attention, like the cameras, we think that she just might. So the judge said, well, if you do, here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to prepare questions ahead of time that your standby counsel will have to ask you, and you can answer everything question by question. You're not allowed to give what's called a narrative, where she would just take a seat and say, well, this is what I want to talk about today. Just go on and until there would be no end in sight. So the judge already kind of put some parameters on her, Tara. So we'll see if she decides that she doesn't want to testify or not.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm excited to see where this case goes, just because she is such a hot mess. And I really hope we see justice for the kids, and especially Tammy.
Yeah, and yes, and the kids and Tammy have gotten their justice. And so now the victims, that it's a lot to keep straight. Charles Vallow and Brandon Boudreaux are the two victims who we have yet to see whether she'll be convicted with respect to their cases. And Brandon's is an attempted homicide that'll go second. He's alive and well, thank goodness. The case with Charles Vallow is going to go next.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now it's just getting justice for everyone else.
Right.
Okay, if you murder so many people, I slightly think that the death penalty should apply. I don't know.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And prosecutors did seek it.
Okay.
I'll tell you what happened. Here's what happened, Tara. This is interesting. Those prosecutors screwed up. So they filed their notice to seek the death penalty. And at the same time, Cult Mom asserted her right to a speedy trial, which, hey, that's her right as an American. And she's, cloaked in the presumption of innocence. It's up to the government to prove what they've alleged. And so she asserted her right to a speedy trial. And they didn't turn over everything they had in discovery on time. And the judge had given them deadlines saying, hey, trial tick-tock, it's fast approaching. You've got to turn this material over. If not, I can sanction you. There's going to be consequences. And they just didn't do it. And so her legal team was so smart. They raised a motion and said, Judge, how can she be facing the death penalty here as a consequence if they are missing these discovery deadlines and not giving us the material that by law we're entitled to? And the judge agreed with the defense and said, you know what, prosecutors, I'm going to essentially sanction you, and I'm going to dismiss the death penalty as a possibility. And you're going to try this case, and the only option is going to be life because of you not being able to follow the rules, prosecutors, on this Idaho case.
Oh,
So
man.
they really had egg on their face, Tara. Any good prosecutor who's doing a capital case knows that's a priority. I mean, she's entitled to that by law. You don't get to just say, well, I don't feel like making this deadline. I'm going to make my own rules. No, I mean, that was appalling. Let me tell you, it was appalling that they missed those deadlines. And to your point, if anybody deserves it, it's Cult Mom. The death penalty is reserved for the worst of the worst in our society. And she's one of those people. She is, sadly. And so the fact that she managed to avoid the death penalty just through I don't know if it was ineptitude, laziness. I have no idea, which just seemed to be like incompetence, carelessness. Who knows? It's a real shame. It's a crying shame.
Yeah. Well, oh my gosh, she just
I could
upset
go on and on.
me.
You see, I get fired up. I get fired up, Tara. These sweet people didn't deserve that.
Yes, well, I was seeing pictures of the kids earlier and
Oh my
just
gosh, it makes me sick to
I
shut my
don't
mouth.
know. Like, I just have a spot in my heart also for like blonde little kids because, genetics, and you're thinking, like, oh, that could be like my niece, could be my nephew, that could
Yeah.
even be my daughter one day, and
Yeah.
you're just looking at it and you're associating that that could have been in a different situation. That girl could have had a different situation. And that makes me so
Mhm.
sad.
You're so right. Yeah.
Yes. So let's go on to a different case that we decided just to touch a little bit on. But what is happening with the Tupac case? It's now getting pushed now.
Right. Tara, this is so interesting. I'm obsessed with this case. As somebody who grew up on Tupac's music and remember the war of the rappers, the East Coast, West Coast rivalry, right? And when Tupac was killed, I remember like coming to school, I couldn't believe it. And now here we are. Investigators finally charge someone. They charge a guy named Dwayne Keefe D. Davis in Las Vegas for that shooting. They say that at the time he was a gang leader, and he was part of the Crips in Compton, and he was a pretty high ranking member of the Crips. And they say that he called the shot, that he ordered the hit to be done on Tupac. And they say that it was his nephew, Orlando Anderson, who actually was the trigger man. And so if you kind of a refresher on the facts, Tupac was at a light. He was at a light. Suge Knight was driving. Tupac was in the passenger seat. And then right next to them pulls up this car with four people in the car, a driver, a front seat passenger, and two people in the back. Multiple shots were fired. Sadly, Tupac, was taken to the hospital, tried to fight for his life, just did not make it. And it was very hard to get anybody to talk. And Keefe D was the last surviving person in that car. Suge is the last surviving person in the other car. And we know Suge Knight's not talking. He's in prison on another homicide that he did. So Keefe D, way back when, he gave investigators some information. And it wasn't a formal immunity agreement or anything they gave him, but they essentially said to him, okay, if you know what happened to Tupac and Biggie, we can maybe cut you a deal on this drug case. KVD was a drug dealer. He was a really big drug trafficker. And so there was a big dope case against him. That's largely how he got his gang respect and all of that with the Compton Crips. So he talked, and investigators say, look, if you tell us, how the shooting went down, we're not going to use what you say against you. We just, can potentially provide you with some more leniency in your dope case. So he told them that he called the shot and that it was his nephew, Orlando Anderson, who shot and killed Tupac. Well, like I said, everybody's dead. Everybody is deceased. So there's no charging anybody at this point, but investigators at least know what happened. And they don't charge Keefe D because, it was under the umbrella of, look, we're just looking for this information to try to piece together what occurred. Fast forward to a couple years ago, Keefe D writes a book, Tara, called Compton Street Legend. And he tells his story and he talks about how he was the shot caller and he was the big guy who ordered the hit, all of that. He blabs it to the world. Now, who knows if this is true? Who knows if he's just chasing clout? Either way, it's out there. So investigators who are watching him, who still have eyes on him, because he's a criminal, he's a career criminal, they say, okay, wait a minute. What you told us in the walls of the interview room, we agreed not to use against you. But what you put in your book for money, that's fair game. So they charge him with this homicide, right? So now his case is set to go mid-March. And his attorneys, they file a motion to continue the case. And they say they have information coming from witnesses that they need to interview who they believe are going to substantiate that Keefe D wasn't present at the time of the shooting. So back the truck up, time out. He's not there. He's not there is what they're saying. So the judge grants this continuance, Tara, till next February of 2026 to give the defense team time to interview these people. What's the truth is the question now, because Keefe D, we know what he told police. He told Detective Greg Kading, awesome detective. If you want to know more about the case, I would highly recommend his book. It's tremendous about Biggie and Tupac's murders. And Keefe D gives him this interview and says, yep, that's what happened. This is how this all went down. Then he writes in his book, yep, I called the shot. I was in the front seat, saw the whole thing happen. And then suddenly now that he's the guy on trial, he's saying, no, I wasn't there. And his attorneys filed this motion. So the judge granted it. So now the trial isn't happening.
No.
Right. It'll happen next February. But I'll share with you an interesting nugget. When and if this does go in February, expect Diddy's name to come up, brought up by Keefe D's team. I predict that's going to happen, Tara. Doing research and reading into this case, talking to people like investigator Grant Kading, who arguably is the leading authority on it. Keefe D and Diddy knew each other, and Keefe D was Diddy's security when he would come out to the LA area. And Diddy did not like Suge and Tupac. And Keefe D told Greg Kading that Diddy made a comment, something along the lines of, I'd give $1 million for those guys' heads, meaning Suge and Tupac. And Greg Kading writes all about this in his book. And after the incident occurred, Greg Kading said that Keefe D told him that Diddy called him up after the shooting and said, was that us? So I was very much looking forward to this case going because I wanted to see if they were going to try to implicate Diddy. Based on what Keefe D has said in these past interviews, I really think that if it goes, he might try to perhaps point the finger at him or in some way implicate him. And we know Diddy's got his own major legal problems as well, with his trial set to go in May in New York in federal court. So to be continued, I suppose.
Yes. And how many victims have they gathered up now for that case and everything?
They just added another victim. They just added someone else who was connected to Cassie Ventura, who they say Diddy dangled off a balcony. So I believe there are 3 now that are listed with the superseding indictment. I'd have to double check that. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but if my memory serves me correctly, I believe that it's 3.
Okay.
And then there will be other people that come up throughout the course of this. And who knows if there may be other people who may say they have been victimized, but they may not necessarily be listed in the information as a victim. I know you understand the distinction here. So there may be more people that we hear coming up when this one goes. On May the 5th, they're going to start picking the jury, and May 12th is set for the opening statements for him.
Okay. And then, well, we know for sure that he did the stuffed Cassie because we saw the videos of him literally beating her in the elevator and that going around, and that was just even so sad to even see just another person being abused like that.
Horrible. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that Cassie video is going to come in to this trial.
Okay.
That was hard to watch, as you know, Tara. That was really, really hard to watch. And at last check, Diddy just had a recent court hearing where his attorneys were trying to exclude it. And they were trying to say that what CNN aired wasn't the unedited version. They argued that it was sped up and perhaps missing parts. And at first they said that CNN doesn't have the original copy. And CNN said, no, 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 none of that's true. We do have the copy. And it wasn't sped up. But the judge essentially said at the hearing, look, I want both sides to work together on this and make sure we have the video exact and that there's nothing that's questionable because it's going to come on in and this is going to be ugly. So we'll see that and see the way in which he victimized her that investigators are saying is an example of using the criminal enterprise is what they're alleging. They're alleging that Bad Boy Enterprises was a criminal enterprise, that he was conducting all of this coercive, abusive behavior under the guise of the business. And so this is going to be a big, big burden the federal government has. Not going to be easy because we know the argument coming from the Diddy side is going to be that these were consensual acts between adults who wanted to engage in these freak offs and who were looking to party and have a great time together. The behavior might not be behavior everybody deems acceptable or their cup of tea, so to speak. It was what it was. And they're going to say that there was nothing that was illegal that was done. We know the prosecutors are going to say that people were transported across state lines and forced having sex and for long durations, that they were physically very depleted and physically abused as part of that control. So it's really an upsetting case with a set of allegations that are very serious and sickening and going to be uncomfortable. I think it's going to be a series of very uncomfortable days in that courtroom. And the person who's going to be the most uncomfortable is going to be Sean Combs.
I hope he is.
Yeah, it's gonna be bad, the stuff coming in. But he's got a great defense team assembled, and he's not going down without a fight. So it's hard to predict how these things will go, right? And especially because we don't have cameras. And I hate that. I hate that federal courts don't allow cameras. They should. There's no reason why they shouldn't. I hope that changes in our lifetimes, Tara, because I think everybody deserves to see this and judge the evidence for themselves and not based on like what the attorneys say at press conferences or what,
And there's
reporters
not
say
going to
it
be
is.
transcripts, will there be?
So good point. Yeah. So there will be a stenographer, or in some states they call them court reporters who will take everything down, and then that all becomes part of the public record. So media outlets can request them. You have to pay for them and you can get them and look through that. So yes, the tough part about that is it's not instant, right? Because it all has to be, transcribed and then put out there. You don't get them as quickly as you'd like to. So we will be able to see some of it. And I suspect that's just going to be the way we're going to have to cover it because Court TV will be there. We'll go. I would love to go in the courtroom and report on it. I would love to be there and take notes and just kind of go old school, just run out. I used to report in Pennsylvania, so we had no cameras there in state court. So I was kind of used to it. And, I reported on Bill Cosby's trial and you just, take your notes and you come out in front of the camera. This is what happened. Here's who did this and said that. And you try to relate it all as best you can. But we all know the cameras capture everything best. So it's a
Yes.
shame we won't have them for this.
And who was the prosecutor in that case?
In Bill Cosby's,
Yes.
his name is Kevin Steele.
Okay.
And then he had two assistants who are awesome, Stuart Ryan and Kristen Fedden.
Yes,
They're
Kristen.
amazing. She's
I met
amazing.
her at
Yes.
CrimeCon. Yes.
Yes. And, she goes by Chrissy too. But yeah, Kristen Fedden, she's amazing. And that's so funny. You know what? She was another person that I knew who she was because I watched her in the Cosby trial and I thought she was amazing. She had done her law degree at Temple. And
Okay.
one of my professors, I did my LLM at Temple, and one of my professors knew her and knew who she was like, oh my God, she's fantastic, when I was calling her to talk to her about the trial. And Chrissy enjoys my show on Court TV. And so it was funny when I saw her at the Clue Awards, we were like, hi, we both kind of were like, so happy to meet you, kind of like you and I were in the elevator,
Yeah.
like, wait, I know you. And so it was awesome. And yeah, she's great. And she just joined the board at the National Center for Victims of Crime, which I serve on. You probably know Renee Williams too, who's amazing. Their executive director. Do you know Renee? Did you meet her at CrimeCon?
I don't know. May have met, like, sometimes it's like,
Yeah.
unless you see like the faces before,
Yeah.
then you're like,
It's hard, yeah, but, yeah, she's great, so getting to work with Chrissy on that is awesome, and, Stuart Ryan, he's in private practice now, he's incredible too, and he comes on my show as a guest, so it's great to have him as a guest, and we've had to go back to the Cosby trial many times, as an example or something with the different cases we're seeing now. So that experience, was an insightful one, I think, for all of us.
yes. Well, I feel like I bothered you enough about the public
No.
cases and stuff. And I would just love to, first off, for anyone that's dropping off here, where can we find you on social media? Where can we find your podcast?
So I am on social media at Julie Grant ESQ and at Julie Court TV are my handles. And I'm on all the platforms, X, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And my show is Opening Statements on Court TV. And you can watch it wherever you are. We're really accessible any way you get your media. So we're on cable. We're also on Amazon, Pluto, Roku, Apple TV, YouTube TV. And then we're free on the Core TV app or coretv.com. You can stream that way as well.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. And we'll get into the
Thanks for having me,
Patreon.
Tara.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. And we'll get into the Patreon portion talking about how my case would have went
Sure.
or
Oh,
may
gosh.
have would have went. I don't know. We
Oh
don't
my gosh.
know.
The poor thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
So let's get into Patreon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Tara's Baddies Club with Julie Grant. Please give a 5-star review. Please comment down below if you're on YouTube. And please just send in a comment because we always love to hear your feedback. And if it's a critique, a reminder that I love an Oreo cookie sandwich where you say something positive, you do the critique, and then back to something positive again. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.